I told my mom I was coming to Montgomery, Alabama, and I was going to go to what I told her was a lynching museum. And she said, why would they want to do that?
Yeah. I think that we have developed a really advanced coping strategy of silence.
This is the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, a site dedicated to the more than 4,000 victims of lynching in America.
You know, we started the research years ago, and then the monuments started to come. And when they arrived, I think the thing that completely blew me away, that I hadn't just thought about before, was sort of seeing these names.
He is Bryan Stevenson, a lawyer who founded the Equal Justice Initiative, or EJI, an organization with a long and powerful record of getting more than 100 people off of death row, of fighting for juveniles with life sentences, and of winning cases that went as high as the Supreme Court.
Even in the names, you see stories like this is an entire family that's killed in Tatnall County, Georgia. And those stories are everywhere. Elizabeth Lawrence lynched in Birmingham, 1933. School teacher coming home, she was walking and a bunch of white kids started throwing stones at her. And like any good teacher, she said to these kids, don't throw stones at people. They went home and told their parents that they had been chastised by a black woman. The parents were outraged. They organized a mob. They went to her home and they lynched her.
The memorial and a nearby museum that connects slavery, lynching, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration open on April 26th. And some people might find it difficult to make the connection between slavery and mass incarceration. It might be a difficult leap for some people.
Well, and I don't think people should leap. I think it's a continuum, right? This picture gives insight on why we're talking about this. Southern prisons made incarcerated people pick cotton into the 80s and early 1990s. And that's where that language in the in the 13th Amendment that prohibits slavery except for people convicted of crimes becomes so relevant. This isn't an accident.
Right.
It's funny, I'm starting to sound like the people who raised me. But I'm too old for it. I've seen too much. I don't want to go through another 30 years of seeing people wrongly convicted and brutalized and condemned and mistreated and not do something disruptive, do something different.
What is your hope that people will take away from this museum once they spend time here going through the exhibits?
I think we need to create spaces in this country where we tell the story of what happened to Native people, where we tell the story of what happened to African Americans, where we tell the story of slavery, the story of lynching, the story of segregation. And at the end of it, people are motivated to say, never again. Because I don't think we've ever been required to say that. So my hope is that people will leave this space prepared to say, never again can we tolerate racial bias and bigotry anywhere. And I think if we create a consciousness like that, we can begin to expect more from our institutions, from our schools, from our system, our court system, from our elected leaders than we expect right now. We don't expect as much as we should.
So, there's something happening in this country. There's a readiness at mass consciousness. There's a waking up in large part because of digital media, because those of us who prefer to not look at a thing can no longer avoid looking at a thing. And that can be so uncomfortable. and yet it is so deeply necessary. That is true of our lives at a collective level. It's true of our lives at an individual level. When we avoid looking at something, it grows. When we have an unwillingness to reconcile an absence of integrity in our lives, it expands. That's true at the collective consciousness, and it's true at the individual consciousness. So my invitation for us this day is to think about this as a people that walk on this land and look at this in the ways that it shows up in your individual lives. There is something that is uniquely brewing in the consciousness of humanity now that we are having these conversations at the scale we are having them at. That is an indication that there is a readiness to birth something new. I am very encouraged by that. We have oftentimes said here that we are a community of midwives. And when the midwife is attending a birth of new life, they do not wonder if the new life will come. Now, the mother may wonder. She may wonder, how in the world is this going to happen? But the midwife is present to know where this is going. And that's what this community exists to assert. This community exists to assert that the consciousness of life itself is evolutionary, always moving forward, always growing and expanding. And you and I can acknowledge the struggle, we can feel the struggle, we can know the struggle, and we can affirm that the struggle doesn't take us out. That's what we're here to be and do. So I want to just share a little bit about, share a little more about what Bryan Stevenson said. He said, people are never fully ready. That's such an important line. If we wait for people to be ready, change will never happen. You know that to be true about your own life. If we wait for your damn self to be ready, we are hardwired to sit in our mess. So he says, people are never fully ready. It's always a challenge, but that's why it's so important. That's why it's so urgent. You could say that this country wasn't ready for emancipation in 1865. Should we then have said, well, let's wait then? You could say it wasn't ready to give up lynching. So should we wait? You could say it wasn't ready for the Montgomery bus boycott. It wasn't ready for the civil rights movement. But it is necessary because there are too many of us who want to be free. And we can't get to freedom if we don't talk more honestly about our past. Speaking honestly about your past is your greatest portal to freedom. Speaking honestly about our past in this country is our greatest portal to freedom. If you have ever taken a class with me, or if you have been here for any period of time, the way I stay free is by telling you all my dirt. It keeps me clean. You know, there's an expression in the 12-step program, you are as sick as your secrets. So look at the thing in your life that you don't want anyone to know about. That is your degree of sickness. And that is true of this country. So we must be a community, we must be a people that has the spiritual maturity to sit through the discomfort of birthing the new you. Because if we aren't those people, then I don't know who will be those people. So Bryan Stevenson goes on to say, we want them to see the pain. We want them to see the suffering. We want them to see the anguish. But we also want them to see the humanity and the strength and the dignity and the capacity to endure. What he's talking about there is polarity. Your spiritual maturation, my spiritual maturation, is commensurate with my degree of comfort with polarity. The spiritual maturation of the consciousness of humanity is evolving out of its addiction to that which feels nice. Because when we are attached to feeling safe and nice, very little gets birthed. You know, as someone who has birthed 4 babies, nice is not the word I'd use to describe the experience. And I am profoundly grateful for what came out of that messy experience. That's what's happening right now. So imagine you and I are here doing the work within ourselves, first and foremost, because the moment we think we have to help those people get woke, watch out. We need to first do the work right here, where am I asleep? And then let me be a voice of and for that in the places and spaces I frequent. So let me share with you, Carmen, I was so inspired by the Gold Rush Women's Conference. Carmen is one of the organizers of the Gold Rush Women's Conference that I spoke at 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that I was so impressed by, and this is one of the things that I love about Christ Universal Temple, is I believe it was Reverend Sherry James, your sister, said to the group, what does the word faith mean? And Reverend Sherry James stood up, and she was like, "Adarra." I was like, oh my gosh, Reverend Sherry James, you just got me all excited over here. Do you know what happens when your mind is that clear that a word is spoken and you can stand at attention and break it down? So I'm not there yet on the word faith, but I'd like to share with you what Reverend Sherry James shared. She said, faith is the perceiving power of the mind, linked with the power to shape substance, spiritual assurance, the power to do the seemingly impossible, the ability to understand what these times require. It is a moment of faith. You know, I oftentimes, and I've been saying it for a year and a half, since November 2016, that Donald Trump is one of the great healers of humanity. But we got to be careful not to hear that as a glib statement. It's not like you can say he's one of the great healers of humanity and then keep walking about your merry way. It's like, okay, I'm here to midwife this thing. So he's one of the great healers of humanity. What does that call me into being? To be a person of faith. to be a person that affirms and asserts that the evolutionary impulse is what's real. So this idea of polarity, there's something called the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. And you know, it's so perfect when you're ever thumbing through a book. Perhaps yours is like 50 Shades of Grey. Mine is the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. And you're just like thumbing through. And then it opens up to this. The positive pole of mind is spirituality. The negative pole is materiality. The first is I am. The second is I am not. Now, first of all, notice that I am is capitalized. I am not is not capitalized. Understand that the I am is being correlated to the positive pole, and the I am not is being correlated to the negative pole. When the I am not thoughts get possession of a life, that life goes down into negation or falls asleep. That is the importance of community. We all know folks in community that have fallen asleep and are trapped in the seduction of an I am not conversation. The importance of community is that when you forget your I am nature, someone here can remember for you. When the I am not thoughts get possession of a life, that life goes down into negation or falls asleep. Everything that relaxes, it's I am energy, I am power, I am life, falls asleep. If in our daily experiences we relax our hold upon the high spiritual ideas, some part of our life is falling asleep. So if we relax, if we just go, you know what, I can't do it today. Consider, that's the power of what Reverend Sherry James demonstrated. She did not, at some point in her life, Reverend Sherry made a choice to cultivate her beingness, to develop herself as unshakable. So the inquiry gets called out, what does faith mean? And Reverend Sherry can stand up and go, brrrah. But what that requires is a devotional practice to your I am nature. What that requires is us not letting ourselves get sloppy with our speak about ourselves. Now, you might be saying, oh, I need some grace. You can have some grace. You can have some grace. But as I said to our class last week, when there started to become the seduction of a story of lack and limitation, when there started to develop a story in our class about how the world is unsafe and something out here could get me, I had to be clear-minded enough to hear the lie that's about to take over the space and speak up and interrupt the lazy thought. Do you hear what I'm saying? And you want to know what? That is not comfortable. I, as someone who is very empowered, who loves herself so much, got scared. But as I said to the group, I am here because I am interested in truth students. If you want story students, you should go somewhere else. There is a whole bunch of opportunity for story out on the planet. Now understand, The power of someone like Beyonce, she's such a demonstration of the consciousness of humanity. One of the things that is so unique to her art is that she has created a big, broad space of revealing her struggle, but not being taken out by her struggle. If you listen, I obsessively watch Lemonade, so if you don't, you maybe should. There is so much encoded in that body of work. And what she says is, I'm going to show you all of my mess. This is all the stuff I'm dealing with, and still I slay. And that's the big message. You can have your messiness. You can have it. No one here is trying to tell you to pretend like you don't have mess. That's why I share my mess all the time. Just don't be your mess. So, the positive pole of mind is spirituality. The negative pole is materiality. The first is I am. The second is I am not. When the I am not thoughts get possession of your life, that life, your life, goes down into negation and you fall asleep. Everything that relaxes its I am energy, I am power, I am life falls asleep. If in our daily experiences we relax our hold upon the high spiritual ideas, some part of our life is falling asleep. If you know when you drink wine, you fall asleep to the high idea of you don't drink wine. That's like a metaphor. You know what I'm saying? Some people really should not drink wine. But really what I'm saying is if you have behaviors that get you just into a sleepy state, you got to cut those behaviors out. They're not the highest idea of you. So maybe we could talk about a man named W.E.B. Du Bois. He said, "What a world this will be when human possibilities are freed, when we discover each other, when the stranger is no longer the potential criminal and the certain inferior." Biblically, the stranger is the other. So whoever we're culturally in agreement as the other, for some of us, that's an internalized projection. And some of us, it looks very literally like the other. But that is the opportunity to do the reconciliation work. If we were in South Africa, we would be talking about apartheid. If we were in Germany, we would be talking about the Holocaust. But folks, we are in the United States of America. So we're going to talk about what we don't want to talk about in this country. From what I understand, in the country of Germany, the Holocaust is taught from the time one is very little. It's taught regularly. It's taught comprehensively, such that it is never repeated again. But that requires a willingness to be done with those behaviors. And if we are still in support of those behaviors, then first we got to wake up. Because as I oftentimes say in a nod to one of my teachers, Jim Dethmer, you cannot shift what you cannot accept. So we have to sit in the discomfort of what's not working. And that is true of our individual lives, and that is true of our collective experience. In the Revealing Word, which is another version of a metaphysical Bible dictionary, another one of my musings, the word freedom is defined as such: the quality or state of being without thought or restraint, bondage, limitation, or repression, having a sense of complete well-being. It is a result of regulating one's life according to principle, not according to what anyone else may think or say. It is gained only through spiritual development, gained in long hours of communion with God in silence. Now, when I use the word God, I'm talking about an indwelling presence, an infinite nature, a universal life in back of all things that is nearer than your breath and vaster than your being. I'm not asking you to sit in long periods of silence in communion with some deity outside of you. I'm asking you to go right here. One of the things that has happened since I turned 40 a couple weeks ago, and it's weird. It's weird. Like, I was not, people have that joke, like, well, do you feel different? And it's like, I do, actually. Something happened. Something happened when I turned 40. And all of a sudden, something woke up in me. And it said, Lola, all of the ways that you're bleeding energy and you're expending so much out here, you got to bring it in. The time now is for you to be still and to get very clear in discerning how and with whom and why you invest your energy. One of the things I love about seeing someone like Bryan is he has gotten very clear on what his mission is on the planet. His mission is to disrupt mass incarceration. This past week, I attended my uncle's funeral. He was a priest, he was a Monsignor, and there were 76 priests that attended his funeral. That is a lot of priests. There were smells and bells and all kinds of things going on. And one of the things that struck me in the homily at his funeral was the articulation of him was that he gave himself to community. He gave himself to community. And as we walked out of the church, all these 76 priests and the archbishop were in their costumes, and it was very dramatic, and it was very moving, because it was like, wow, this man really, really gave his life to pastoral care. That was his heart. He said, I want to tend to the people. And as my dad, his older brother, stood there, he started tearing up. And he just kept saying, he gave himself to the people. He gave himself to the people. He gave himself to the people. That is a paradigm that I think we could each ask ourselves. To what do we give ourselves? When all is said and done, and you lay your body down, what do you want to have been said about you? Did you make a lot of money, honey? That's probably not the most important thing that you want said about you. Nothing wrong with it. But what did you leave as an impression on this planet? So, Bodhi Spiritual Center, the time is now. We are here to be a holy disruptor to the consciousness of humanity, to awaken ourselves, those we love, from our sleepy states, to call forward the high idea of humanity. It is not a mistake that we are watching Kanye West and John Legend tweet one another. There's like a sandpaper going on. It's like we're working it out. It's not an accident that Waffle House and Starbucks are under scrutiny. There's an exposure happening. It's not an accident that my girl, Joy Ann Reid, is getting worked That's good. Even the most progressive among us are being called to task. That is how evolution works. So I thank you for being a community that's willing to have this conversation. I thank you for being a community of people that when you are served lemons, you make lemonade. Many blessings.